Daniel Bartlam. On April 25, 2011, at their home in Red Hill, 14-year-old Daniel walked into his mother's bedroom while she was asleep and struck her 7 times with a claw hammer, fracturing her skull and face. After killing her, he poured petrol around her bedroom, placed newspaper on a gas fire, and set the house ablaze. He then took his younger brother and the family dog safely outside. He initially lied to emergency services and police, claiming a masked intruder had broken in and started the fire. Investigators searching his computer discovered that Daniel had become obsessed with a violent storyline from a soap opera, Coronation Street. He explicitly copied a scene where a character named John Stape murders a woman with a hammer. Furthermore, detectives recovered a deleted 9-page script written by Daniel featuring a character with his exact name who commits the perfect murder by killing his mother with a hammer and burning the house down. Daniel was tried at Nottingham Crown Court. During the proceedings, he changed his story, admitting to manslaughter but denying murder. His defense claimed he had lost self-control following a heated argument with his mother. The prosecution presented the recovered script and search history, proving intense premeditation. In February 2012, a jury unanimously rejected his defense and found him guilty of murder. On April 2, 2012, Daniel, then 15 years old, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years before he could be considered for parole. The judge labeled the killing grotesque and senseless. Talon Barton. He is in prison for committing a brutal, unprovoked stabbing rampage in July 2015 that left 2 members of his foster family dead and 2 others critically injured. This case shocked the public because the family had taken Barton into their home to support him, and he later told psychologists he committed the murders simply because he wanted to know what it was like to die. The 2 deceased victims were Theo Palmieri, Barton's 17-year-old friend, and Theo's father, Coleman Palmieri, 52. Barton also severely stabbed Theo's mother, Dr. Cindy Norvell, and her brother, Theodore Norvell, a visiting university professor from Canada. Both survived despite critical injuries. On July 19, 2015, in Laytonville, California, Barton took a large knife from the kitchen, entered Theo's bedroom while he slept. He covered his mouth and slit his throat. When Coleman and Cindy rushed to investigate the commotion, Barton attacked them and Theodore. After the stabbings, Barton cut the home's landlines and briefly held 2 teenage girls in the house hostage, preventing them from calling emergency services. Eventually, the girls convinced Barton to de-escalate. He used a cell phone to call emergency services himself and calmly confessed to the dispatcher. In September 2015, Barton pleaded guilty in Mendocino County Superior Court to 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, and 2 counts of false imprisonment. He accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, a move supported by the victim's family due to religious objections to capital punishment. I don't think he would have gotten the death penalty anyways because he was a minor when he committed the crimes. On October 6, 2015, Judge Ann Mormon sentenced Barton to 71 years to life in prison. According to the terms of his sentence, he must serve a mandatory 64 years for the murders before serving 85% of the remaining 7 years, making his earliest possible parole date in the year 2085 when he would be 89 years old. Barton showed zero remorse or emotion during his arrest and trial. When the judge told him during sentencing, "I'll see to it you never see the light of day," Barton chillingly smiled and gave the judge a thumbs up while shackled. Paris Bennett. Bennett is in prison because he was convicted of the calculated, premeditated capital murder of his 4-year-old sister, Ella Lee Bennett, whom he stabbed to death to psychologically destroy their mother. The case attracted global attention due to Bennett's high intellect, a reported IQ of 141, his calculated behavior, and diagnosis of psychopathy. On February 5, 2007, in Abilene, Texas, 13-year-old Paris convinced the family's babysitter to leave early. He then entered his sleeping sister's bedroom, essayed her, and stabbed her 17 times. After the attack, he calmly called emergency services to report that he had accidentally killed someone. Investigators soon learned the murder was entirely premeditated. Paris later confessed that his original plan was to murder his mother, Charity Lee, but he realized that killing her would only make her suffer for a few minutes. Instead, he chose to murder Ella because it would trap his mother in a state of endless emotional agony for the rest of her life, one child dead and the other locked away in prison. Because Perez was 13 years old at the time of the crime, Texas law prevented prosecutors from trying him as an adult, seeking the death penalty, or sentencing him to life without parole. He was prosecuted in juvenile court, where he pleaded guilty to capital murder. Perez was handed a 40-year prison sentence, the maximum penalty legally allowable for a juvenile convicted of capital murder in Texas at the time. Evaluators formally diagnosed him with psychopathy and conduct disorder. In subsequent interviews from behind bars, he demonstrated a chilling, articulate self awareness and an ongoing lack of remorse, openly admitting to prison visitors that he relished his mother's anguish. Bennett's officially recorded IQ score is 141, a level of intelligence that places him in the top 0.25% of the global population and categorizes him as a genius. In criminal psychology, this extreme level of intellect combined with his clinical diagnosis of psychopathy makes him an incredibly rare, dangerous, and heavily studied figure. He is approaching his first parole eligibility date on February 5, 2027. If the parole board denies his release, his maximum sentence and projected release date is February 4, 2047. By then, he will be 53 years old. One thing that got to me while researching this case was the mother's reaction. She chose to stay by his side for years. I think her position was quite difficult because, as a mother, you do love all your children, no matter what they do. But in this case, I don't know what to say. Charity had another child after all this happened, a baby boy named Phoenix. Because she wanted to protect him, she eventually cut all ties with Paris, changed her name, and moved. In case Paris actually gets released next year, both her and Phoenix could be in danger. David Biro. Biro is in prison because he was convicted of the brutal 1990 thrill killings of a young couple and their unborn child in Winnetka, Illinois. He was just 16 years old at the time of the crime and he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The victims were Nancy Langert, 25, and her husband Richard, 29, and their unborn child. Nancy was 3 months pregnant at the time. On April 7, 1990, Biro, a junior at New Trier High School, used burglary tools to break into the Langards' townhouse. He hid in the dark and waited for the couple to return home from dinner. When they arrived, Biro confronted them at gunpoint with a stolen 22 caliber pistol. He forced them into the basement, handcuffed Richard, and executed him with a shot to the back of the head. He then shot Nancy in the chest and abdomen. As Biro fled, a dying Nancy used her own blood to draw a heart and the letter U, which probably meant I love you. This was found on the basement floor next to her husband's body. Biro had no personal connection to the couple and no financial motive. Prosecutors established that he committed the murders purely for the kicks of it, to see what it felt like to kill someone and get away with it. He later bragged about the crime to a high school classmate, stating, "They deserved to die, they were annoying." While incarcerated, Biro eventually admitted guilt and wrote letters to Nancy's sister, Jean Bishop, expressing remorse, which became the subject of extensive media coverage and a book on forgiveness. Despite his claims of rehabilitation, Illinois courts repeatedly rejected his bids for freedom. In April 2022, Cook County Circuit Court Judge Mary Margaret Brosnahan officially denied Biro's final petition for resentencing. The court ruled that his life sentence would stand due to the calculated, heinous nature of the crimes. Cassie Bjorge. She is in prison because she pleaded guilty to the gruesome 2017 thrill killings of her own grandparents, whom she and her boyfriend brutally murdered in their home. The case shocked investigators due to the extreme violence used, the young age of the perpetrators, and the cold-blooded behavior they exhibited in the days following the murders. The two victims were Cassie's paternal grandparents, Randall Bjorge and Wendy Bjorge, both 63 years old. The couple had legally taken custody of Cassie to provide her with a stable environment. In April 2017, 17-year-old Cassie and her 19-year-old boyfriend, Johnny Ryder, entered the grandparents' Lawrenceville, Georgia home. They ambushed the couple, beating them severely with a tire iron, a hammer, and a baseball bat, and stomping on them before finishing the attack by slitting both of their throats. After the murders, the teens poured bleach on the bodies, dragged them into a bedroom, and used caulk to seal the doors and windows to trap the smell of decomposition. They remained living in the house with the decaying bodies for roughly a week. During this time, Cassie hosted a party for friends who had no idea what had happened. She ordered takeout and used her grandmother's phone to text family members to pretend everything was fine. Following her arrest, she confessed to police that she killed them because she felt they had become too strict. Furthermore, investigators revealed the couple had detailed plans to murder more people, including Johnny's family and Cassie's own mother. The crime unraveled when the duo violently attacked Johnny Ryder's sister and her boyfriend in a separate incident. The sister escaped and notified authorities. This led police back to the grandparents' home for a welfare check, where a brief SWAT standoff ensued after Cassie and Johnny attempted a failed double suicide pact before being taken into custody. They both pleaded guilty to murder, aggravated assault, and theft. A judge sentenced both teens to 2 consecutive life sentences with the possibility of parole. Because the sentences run consecutively, they are required to serve a mandatory minimum of 60 years behind bars before they can even be considered for release. Amy Lee Black. She was originally sentenced to life in prison for orchestrating and executing the brutal 1990 robbery and murder of a married father of two. The victim was Dave Van Bogelen, a 34-year-old husband and father from Michigan. On December 7, 1990, 16-year-old Amy Lee Black and her 19-year-old boyfriend, Jeffrey Abrahamson, noticed a large amount of cash in Van Bogelen's wallet. They lured him into an apartment with the intention of robbing him. They successfully stole approximately $1,500 from him. During the ambush, Black struck the man over the head with an empty Jack Daniels bottle. She and the boyfriend then took him to a rural road in Fruitport Township, where he was bludgeoned and repeatedly stabbed to death before his body was abandoned. In an initial confession to the police, Black stated she helped with the murder because she always wanted to know if you could just kill somebody and get away with it. During her trial, she changed her narrative, claiming she was a victim of an abusive upbringing and that her older boyfriend had forced her to participate. Black was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Her boyfriend, Jeffrey Abrahamson, received the same sentence. In August 2021, a judge officially vacated her life sentence and resentenced her to a term of 35 to 60 years. Because the boyfriend was 19 at the time of the crime, he was an adult and remained ineligible for any reduction. After initially being denied once, the Michigan Parole Board approved her release. Amy Lee Black was officially released on parole in September 2022 at the age of 48. Prior to her release from the Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility, a judge ordered Black to pay $1.87 million in restitution to Dave Van Bogelen's estate and surviving family. She is technically no longer in a physical cell, but her freedom remains heavily restricted. Legal reviews have been initiated regarding her failure to pay the multi-million-dollar obligation, creating ongoing legal friction with the victim's family, who publicly fought against her release. Ronald Black Cloud. He is in prison because he was convicted of second-degree murder for the 2018 fatal shooting of a man during a street altercation. He was only 14 years old at the time of the crime, but he was tried as an adult. The victim was Nathan Graham, a 43-year-old resident of Rapid City, South Dakota. On the night of August 17, 2018, Ronald Black Cloud and his 16-year-old friend Ross Johnson walked to the home of another friend to invite him out. When they arrived, the friend's mother, Shayla Colbert Graham, and her husband, Nathan Graham, met them at the door and told them to leave. A physical shoving match erupted in the street between Nathan Graham and Ross Johnson. During the fight, Johnson, who was armed, handed his pistol to Black Cloud and instructed him to shoot. He fired the weapon, striking Nathan Graham once in the head, inflicting a fatal wound. Black Cloud was prosecuted as an adult in the Seventh Circuit Court in Pennington County, South Dakota. He pleaded not guilty, but his co-defendant Ross Johnson pleaded guilty to felony charges and testified against him as part of a plea deal. In October 2021, a jury found Black Cloud guilty of second-degree murder. On February 7, 2022, he was sentenced to 40 years in state prison. Due to U.S. Supreme Court precedents regarding juvenile offenders, South Dakota law prohibited sentencing him to life without parole because he was a minor when the crime occurred. He was given roughly 3.5 years of credit for time already served in jail. Black Cloud appealed the verdict, claiming the trial court was wrong in handling jury selection and referencing his co-defendant's plea deal. In October 2023, the South Dakota Supreme Court formally rejected his arguments and affirmed his 40-year prison sentence. Eric Blackerby. He was convicted of murder for hitting a peer in the head with an aluminum baseball bat during a fight. He was 16 years old at the time of the attack, and he was prosecuted and sentenced as an adult. The victim was William Allen Neff, a 19-year-old resident of Maylene, Alabama. On July 29, 2015, a group gathered at a popular local swimming and hangout spot on the banks of the Cahaba River known as the Slab in western Shelby County. A physical fight broke out over a girl between William Neff and Blackerby's older brother, Andrew Blackerby. During or immediately following the fistfight, while Neff was trying to get back up, 16-year-old Eric Blackerby approached from behind. Armed with an aluminum baseball bat, he struck Neff in the head with immense force multiple times. Neff suffered severe brain damage from multiple blunt force traumas to his skull and succumbed to his catastrophic injuries a few days later. On September 26, 2017, Shelby County Circuit Judge William Bostic III sentenced Blackerby, then 18, to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. During sentencing, the judge heavily rebuked Blackerby, calling him the person parents fear the most because he intentionally brought a weapon to a fistfight knowing exactly what would happen. Blackerby remains incarcerated within the Alabama Department of Corrections system, serving out his life sentence. Rebecca Blackmore. She was sentenced to prison after pleading guilty to second-degree murder for stabbing her newborn infant daughter to death with a pair of scissors. The case attracted significant local and national attention due to the tragic nature of the crime and the young age of the mother, who was a high school sophomore at the time. On June 17, 2011, 16-year-old Blackmore secretly gave birth to the baby girl in the bathroom of her family's home in Knott's Island, North Carolina. Immediately after the birth, Blackmore used a pair of scissors to stab the infant multiple times. Following the attack, she hid the newborn's body inside her bedroom closet. Later that day, Blackmore suffered medical complications and had a family member take her to the emergency room at Chesapeake Regional Medical Center in Virginia. While receiving treatment, she admitted to hospital staff that she had given birth but falsely claimed the baby was stillborn. Hospital personnel notified the county sheriff's office, and deputies sent to her residence discovered the infant's body in the closet. An autopsy later proved the baby had been born alive and died from multiple stab wounds. She was arrested and initially charged as an adult with first-degree murder, which carried a potential sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. On August 19, 2013, prosecutors finalized the plea agreement with Blackmore's defense team. To avoid a life sentence, she pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of second-degree murder. Blackmore was sentenced to serve between 10 years and 5 months to 13 years and 3 months in state prison. North Carolina authorities highlighted during the trial that the state has a safe haven law. This law legally allows parents to anonymously leave an unharmed newborn up to 7 days old with a hospital employee or at the other designated safe locations without facing criminal prosecution, an alternative that was heavily emphasized in public coverage of the tragedy. Because she was sentenced in August 2013 and given credit for prior jail time, Rebecca Blackmore has already completed her prison term and has been released. Zachary Blanchard. He is in prison because he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for ambushing and shooting his father to death. He was 16 years old at the time of the crime and orchestrated the murder so that he and his friends could steal his father's money and vehicle to go on a trip to the beach. On April 2, 2014, in Greene County, Tennessee, 16-year-old Zachary followed his father out to a chicken coop on their property. While Robert was crouching over to pick up baby chicks, Zachary aimed a gun at his head and pulled the trigger, killing him instantly. Immediately after the murder, Zachary went into the house, stole his father's wallet, money, several guns, and ammo. He met up with 3 teenage friends who joined him in stealing his father's van. The four fled the state, leading law enforcement on a multi-state manhunt. They were captured roughly 10 hours later by authorities in Newberry County, South Carolina, where they were headed toward Myrtle Beach. When family members and investigators asked why he did it, it was revealed that his primary motive was incredibly trivial. He simply wanted to steal his father's resources to go to the beach, amplified by peer pressure from the other teens. Due to the severe nature of the crime, Zachary Blanchard was transferred from juvenile court and prosecuted as an adult. He was originally indicted on 3 counts of first-degree murder, reflecting different legal theories of premeditation and felony murder, and 1 count of especially aggravated robbery. The 3 other teenagers who fled with him were charged as juveniles with theft and being accessories after the fact in Tennessee, alongside additional charges in South Carolina for possession of a stolen vehicle and resisting arrest. In September 2016, just as jury selection was scheduled to begin for his first-degree murder trial, Zachary accepted a plea agreement. The state agreed to amend his primary charge down to second-degree murder. An East Tennessee judge sentenced Zachary, then 18 years old, to 30 years in prison. Under Tennessee sentencing guidelines, he is required to serve at least 85% of that sentence, making him eligible for potential release on good behavior after 25 and a half years. Matthew Borges. He was convicted of the premeditated, brutal first-degree murder and decapitation of his high school classmate. The case drew widespread horror due to the extreme severity of the violence and the young age of the perpetrator, who was just 15 years old when he committed the crime. The victim was Lee Manuel Viloria Paulino, a 16-year-old student at Lawrence High School in Massachusetts. On November 18, 2016, Borges lured the kid to the Merrimack River under the guise of smoking Mary Jane. There, he brutally killed him, with medical examiners finding 76 distinct stab and slash wounds. Following the murder, Borges decapitated the victim and severed his hands. The body was thrown into the river, and a dog walker discovered the remains on December 1, 2016. Prosecutors established that Borges was motivated by jealous rage, believing the victim had spoken to his girlfriend. The incident was also linked to a plan to rob the victim's home. Despite being 15, Borges was tried as an adult due to the heinous nature of the crime. The prosecution presented incriminating social media messages, including a text from Borges stating his interest in causing pain. In May 2019, a jury found him guilty of first-degree murder with deliberate premeditation and extreme atrocity or cruelty. He was then sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. While first-degree murder usually requires life without parole, a 2013 court ruling determined this was unconstitutional for juveniles, ensuring his eligibility for parole in 2046. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.